My name is Chris, and I'm 28 years old. I work the night shift at a massive shipping warehouse just outside the city. It's a pretty lonely job, to be honest. I'm usually the only one there, overseeing inventory, making sure everything runs smoothly. The pay's decent, and the quiet doesn't bother me. At least, it didn't until that one night. It started like any other shift. I clocked in at 10 p.m., grabbed a coffee, and headed to my station near the back of the warehouse. The place was huge, rows of towering shelves filled with crates and pallets stretching out as far as the eye could see. The hum of the fluorescent lights was the only sound that kept me company most nights. I liked the solitude, or at least I thought I did. Around midnight, I noticed something strange. Several crates were missing from their designated spots. At first, I thought it was a simple mistake in the logs. Maybe someone had moved them during the day shift and forgotten to update the system. But when I checked the logs, everything was in order. No trucks had come in or out during the night, and the system showed that the crates should still be there. I brushed it off, thinking I must have overlooked something, and went back to my rounds. But the nagging feeling wouldn't leave me. I couldn't shake the thought that something was off. An hour later, I decided to check the security cameras. It was mostly routine for me to scan through the footage every few hours, but tonight, I was paying extra attention. As I scrolled through the recordings, something caught my eye. At around 3 a.m., I saw a man on the screen moving through the shadows of the warehouse. I paused, my heart skipping a beat. He wasn't supposed to be there. I rewound the footage and watched it again, more closely this time. The man entered from a back entrance I rarely used, moving quickly and deliberately, staying just out of sight of most of the cameras. He didn't take anything, at least not on the footage I saw, but he moved like he knew the place well. Panic set in. Was there someone in the warehouse with me? I grabbed my flashlight and set out to search the facility. The silence of the warehouse, which I usually found calming, now felt suffocating. Every little sound echoed in the vast space. My own footsteps, the faint hum of the lights, the distant creaks of metal racks settling. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I made my way to the back of the warehouse, I stumbled across something I had never seen before. A section of the floor that didn't match the rest. It was a hatch, hidden behind a stack of crates. My pulse quickened as I realized what it was. A hidden underground tunnel. I crouched down and lifted the hatch, peering into the darkness below. A narrow set of stairs led down into a dimly lit passageway. It was clear that this tunnel had been used recently. I didn't need to be a detective to figure out what was going on. Someone had been using the warehouse to smuggle goods, and those missing crates hadn't just disappeared. They'd been stolen. As I stood there, trying to decide what to do next, I heard footsteps approaching from behind me. My heart leaped into my throat. I barely had time to close the hatch and hide behind a stack of pallets before the footsteps stopped nearby. I held my breath, peeking through a small gap between the crates. It was Carl, one of my coworkers. He was supposed to be off that night, but here he was, meeting with a group of men. They exchanged cash and whispered in hushed voices, the sound of crumpling bills and low murmurs filling the air. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Carl was in on it. He was part of the smuggling operation. I stayed hidden until they finally left, my heart pounding in my chest. As soon as I was sure they were gone, I bolted back to my station and called the police. My hands were shaking as I explained everything. The missing crates, the footage, the tunnel, and Carl's involvement. The police arrived within the hour, but by the time they searched the warehouse, Carl was long gone. They found the tunnel, the crates, and plenty of evidence linking the operation to Carl and the other men, but Carl had vanished. The days that followed were a blur. The police questioned me over and over, but there wasn't much more I could tell them. Carl had disappeared without a trace. Now, weeks later, I can't stop looking over my shoulder. Every time I leave my apartment, every time I drive home from work, I feel like someone's watching me. I know Carl knows I was the one who reported him. I don't know where he is, but I know he's out there somewhere, and the thought of him coming back for revenge keeps me up at night. I don't think I'll ever feel safe again. My name is Emily, and I'm 29 years old. I've been working as a night nurse at a small psychiatric hospital for a little over a year now. It's not an easy job, but I've always enjoyed helping people, especially those who seem to be forgotten by the rest of the world. The quiet nights were something I had grown used to, but one shift changed everything for me. It was a Tuesday night around 2 a.m. when I first noticed him. I was doing my rounds, checking on the patients who were mostly asleep in their rooms. As I passed by the common room, I saw a man sitting alone in one of the chairs. He looked disheveled, his clothes worn and his hair unkempt. I hadn't seen him before, and I knew all the patients on the ward. I assumed he must have been admitted recently, though it was strange I hadn't been told. Curious, I checked the patient files at the nurse's station. That's when I saw his name, Peter Morrison. The file said he'd been checked in 2 years ago, but had never been discharged. I felt a chill run down my spine. No one stays that long without me knowing about it. The next morning, I asked my supervisor about Peter. She glanced at the file and waved it off, saying it was likely a clerical mistake. But something didn't sit right with me. Mistakes happen, sure, but patients don't just get forgotten like that. The following night, Peter was sitting in the same spot again, staring blankly at the wall. He didn't speak, didn't even seem to notice me. But every time I walked past, I could feel his eyes on me. I tried to ignore it, telling myself he was just another patient, but that uneasy feeling kept growing. Things started to get worse after that. I began finding strange notes in my locker, slips of paper with unsettling messages like, "I'm still here, and they can't hide me forever." The handwriting was jagged and rushed, and I knew instantly that it had to be him. But how? The hospital had strict security, and patients weren't allowed near the staff lockers. The worst part was the dreams. I started seeing Peter in my sleep. He would just stand there, in the corner of the room watching me. His hollow eyes followed me everywhere, but he never said a word. The dreams felt so real that I would wake up in a cold sweat, convinced that he had been in the room with me. I decided to dig deeper. I went through old hospital records, searching for anything about Peter Morrison. That's when I found it, an incident report from 2 years ago. It said that Peter had committed suicide in his room. The official report claimed that he had died instantly, but there was no follow-up, no investigation. The incident had been buried under layers of paperwork, almost like the hospital wanted to forget it had ever happened. I couldn't understand it. How could a man who died 2 years ago still be here? How could he be sitting in the common room every night, watching me, leaving those notes? The more I thought about it, the more paranoid I became. I went to my supervisor again, this time armed with the information I had found. When I told her about Peter's death, she looked at me with cold, hard eyes. "You need to let this go," she said, her voice low. "We don't talk about Peter. It was handled." Handled? That's when it clicked. They had covered it up. The hospital didn't want a scandal, didn't want the bad press or the lawsuits. So they swept Peter's death under the rug and moved on. But Peter hadn't moved on. He was still here, trapped in the place where he died, and now he was haunting me. I quit the next day. I couldn't stand being in that place any longer, knowing what they had done. But leaving didn't stop the nightmares. Peter followed me home. I started seeing him out of the corner of my eye, standing in the shadows of my apartment, just like in my dreams. I would find more notes, on my kitchen counter, in my car, on my bedside table. "I'm still here," they always said. No matter where I went, I couldn't escape him. It's been weeks now, and I still feel him watching me. I've tried to convince myself it's all in my head, that it's just my guilt playing tricks on me. But deep down, I know the truth. Peter is still here, and he's never going to leave me. My name is Julia. I'm 33, and I work the night shift at a small gas station in a quiet town. Most nights are uneventful, just a few regulars and truckers passing through. I didn't mind the solitude. In fact, I liked it. But that night changed everything. It was just after midnight, and I was restocking shelves when the door chime went off. I looked up, expecting a regular. Instead, a man stumbled in, his clothes soaked in blood. My heart stopped. He looked hurt, holding his side as he approached the counter. "I've been attacked," he gasped, leaning heavily on the counter. "I need to call the police." Shaking, I grabbed the store phone and handed it to him. But something about him felt wrong. His clothes were a mess, and his eyes kept darting around like he was checking for something or someone. He held the phone but didn't dial, just standing there, breathing heavily. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you need an ambulance?" "No," he said too quickly, shaking his head. "Just the police." But he still didn't call. He kept looking around the store, his fingers twitching as he held the phone. Something about his calmness sent a chill down my spine. If he'd really been attacked, shouldn't he be more panicked? After a long pause, he handed the phone back. "No service," he muttered, shrugging. "I'll figure something out." My stomach dropped. There was nothing wrong with the phone. It worked fine. I forced a smile and pretended to be busy behind the counter, but my instincts were screaming at me to call for help. As he wandered around the store, watching me, I reached under the counter for my cell phone. I slipped into the back room, locking the door behind me as quietly as I could. My hands were shaking as I dialed the local sheriff. When they answered, I whispered what had happened. The sheriff's voice was low and urgent. "Julia, we're looking for a man who matches that description. He's not a victim. He's a suspect. We just found a family murdered in their home about 5 miles from your station. Stay put. We're on our way." I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. My heart pounded in my ears as I tried to stay calm. Outside, I could hear the man moving around, whistling softly to himself. He had to know I'd called someone. Suddenly, there was a loud bang on the door. I jumped, pressing myself against the wall, my breath caught in my throat. "Julia," he called out, his voice calm, almost teasing. "I know you're in there. Let's talk." I stayed silent, praying he'd think I wasn't there. The door rattled again as he pounded on it harder. "Come on, don't be rude," he said, his voice chillingly casual. "I just want to talk." My heart raced, my palms slick with sweat. I could hear the faint sound of sirens in the distance, but they seemed so far away. I didn't know if they'd make it in time. My mind raced with every terrible possibility. Would he break down the door? Would he find me before the police got here? The knocking grew louder and more frantic. "Julia, open the door," he shouted. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the phone. The sirens were getting closer, but so was he. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the knocking stopped. Silence filled the store. I didn't dare move, frozen in place, listening for any sound of him. After what felt like forever, I heard the police pull up outside. I unlocked the door, stumbling out to meet them, my heart still pounding. The man was gone, but his car was found abandoned nearby. Inside, the police found bloody clothes and items belonging to the murdered family. The sheriff assured me they'd catch him, but something about his calmness haunted me. I couldn't shake the image of his smile, the way he had looked so in control, so certain that I was trapped. They told me I was safe now, but I knew better. He knew where I worked, knew my name, and I knew I'd never truly feel safe again.